Hello, welcome to A Declaration. I'm Adrienne Elise, an intuitive healer and teacher and professional astrologer. It seems that it's time in this place, this crucial moment in history of human evolution, for a declaration. Many people talk about this time that we're in as the Second American Revolution, and perhaps we need a second declaration of independence because we're becoming more and more clear through world events that we have been under the control of control energy forces influenced by extraterrestrial forces for thousands of years, keeping humanity's evolution from going forward, essentially keeping humanity as slaves as they feed on our energetic power. But what we're coming to realize right now is we're being shown these control mechanisms very blatantly in our world. And the other thing that's happening is that souls, especially advanced souls, supernova souls, are coming into their awareness that there is nothing more powerful than who they are as an advanced soul in a human body, aware of itself as God consciousness. That is absolutely sovereign. There is nothing above. And yet, throughout these stories and this human evolution, we've all had to give our power away on some level. We all conceded to the fear programming that goes back to Atlantean time that says we can't handle our own power or it's somehow wrong, bad, and dangerous. This power, this is our God-given right, our access to God consciousness right within us. It's the highest form of authority in this realm. And so perhaps it's time for a declaration, supernova souls representative of human souls in general in this human evolution, saying, oh, wait a minute, it might be time for us to say that, proclaim with an official energetic intention, that we are no longer playing. We're no longer beholden to the laws and rules of the control energies that are seeking to keep us from our human evolution. We see now that we're completely sovereign in our power as human souls in a body. So this is an interesting correlation to the energies of the Declaration of Independence, which is such a powerful document to outline these inalienable rights for the human, that God-given rights, that ultimately there's nothing that humans need to answer to besides the law of God. This is a radical idea for the time that we're still quite not ready to embrace. And yet, here we are at this precipice. Now, the reason why the founders of the United States of America, of the colonies, of the United Colonies, the reason why they were pushing for this declaration is because they wanted to ask other countries, especially France, for support. Never could have won the Revolutionary War without the support of France. And yet, how can France give their support if they don't release their bonds and their bans, all their contractual arrangements with the crown, the British crown? So this is a story that has been such a potent energy in the formation of the brotherhood of man, the Sons of Liberty, the energies that began the formation of this country. Now, the country of the U.S. goes back, the seeds of this ideal of a free land of free people, which is, we're so far away from it still, and yet maybe we're just around the corner. Maybe this Declaration of Independence and the Founding Fathers had planted seeds for us to access now in proclaiming our true independence from all power outside of ourselves and proclaiming to all the control energies that we thought were more potent and powerful than who we are, that now we understand we are not beholden, we are not playing, we will not be using our precious energy to feed the lower matrix anymore because we are now sovereign and answerable only to Creator. And this was the inspiration. But we have to, it's really interesting to look back and see how radical these ideas were. And yet it branded a nation. The Revolutionary War could have never been successful without the ideas that came forward in first the document Common Sense by Thomas Paine that led to the declaration of the wording and the verbiage and the branding and the ideas in the Declaration of Independence. And these basic concepts are these inalienable rights, and that humans are answerable to no one but the divine, and that humanity does not need government, does not need to be governed. Now, this is a beautiful Aquarian ideal where we're all going to evolve to the point where we don't need any more anybody above us telling us what we can and can't do, and nobody to enforce the laws because nobody's breaking the laws because we're operating out of humanitarian ideals. This is very Aquarian. So the founding fathers and the original seeds in Europe that started these ideas all are of a big stream of movement that is coming more and more clear, is all connected to Christ consciousness. And this idea of the free human soul, the second American Revolution, the second Declaration of Independence, and the second coming as Christ consciousness descends into our world. So there is an energy with Saint Germain, who was incarnate as Francis Bacon in Europe, who had this original vision of this free land and the seed of this land of the free. And now, he faked his own death, Francis Bacon, apparently, came to be known and lived for a couple hundred years and came to be known as Saint Germain. Now, this energy can tell us directly about this impulse for this free land and what this is really about, and how these influences, these master influences working on this project over eons of time, were seeding and working on this. Now, this is also associated with the moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And this is where all of these things come together. In the readings of Edgar Cayce, there was a whole bunch of things that came through around the Essene cultures. Now, these Essene cultures, at the time of the birth of Jesus, Yeshua, the biblical family and extended family, thousands of souls that for hundreds of years held this vibrational field for that Christ consciousness to come into the body of Yeshua. Those souls and extended family and soul groups of those souls are now playing a part of this bigger role of incarnating Christ consciousness right into their body. This is the second coming. I've been shown intuitively that this Christ consciousness descending into what Christ consciousness is to me, the definition is spiritual energy, pure spirit, but accessible as a concept and an energy right here in this dimension. So Christ consciousness as the second coming is incarnating, and it's happening with groups of souls that are being born as babies in these times, bringing in very pure, very advanced souls. It's also coming in the form of supernova souls, landing home, their bigger spiritual self. This is your embodiment of Christ consciousness, your journey, just like Yeshua showed us, to overcome the physical and come into that light body. Now, also, there's masters who are coming and leaving the planet in bodily form that are supporting this process as well. Lots of information about that biblical family and these players throughout history who have envisioned this Aquarian ideal incarnate right here more than ever, more masters than ever before, actually in form in a body on planet Earth. This seed of this humanitarian ideal and this culture was present in Atlantean time with the technologies that were available to better humanity. All technologies used before Atlantean time, Lemurian time, for the benefit of humanity. Now, then this is also echoed in, there's little pockets of history where these ideals, these Renaissance energies, these fusion of art, science, geometry, nature in creating structures that can support the human on many levels. So this impulse is now coming into fruition. What came through the Edgar Cayce readings, so much about these group of Essenes, and they talked throughout time and the incarnation of these soul groups that they were preparing all the way back then at the beginning of the age of Pisces for this age of Aquarius, when Christ consciousness could fully embody. Now, all these things are lining up, and the astrology of these energies correlate, and the impulses of spiritual impulse of Christ consciousness throughout time correlate with the great conjunction, which is Saturn and Jupiter. Now, we had one of these, a greater conjunction, in December 2020. And so you can check out my video about the greater conjunctions and see all the historical connections between the story of Christ consciousness and our spiritual human evolution, and this all coming to a head right now as we enter this age of Aquarius. So these soul groups have been piggybacking throughout this time, coming and playing these roles. An example of this would be the founding fathers, the revolutionaries, those who fought and died for this freedom, this ideal of freedom, coming back, reincarnating, and with a mission to protect and support the Constitution of the United States as a representation of free humanity. These souls are all back here now, and they're fighting on the cutting edge right there behind the scenes. And this is the Second American Revolution. So it's time for us to declare now, because the parallel here is that the whole energy behind the Declaration of Independence was about saying officially we're cutting our bonds, all contracts with the crown, with British rule, in order to receive help from other sources. Now, the parallel to this, and perhaps what the original declaration was all about, and as seeds for this time, what's behind all the control energies and the crown still today, it's dismantling, but those power structures and that energy, it's all goes back to these control energies that came into play back in Atlantean time, what Edgar Cayce's readings called the Sons of Belial. And they were going against the law of one and self-gratification that created this division, this separation, and a series of traumatic, fearful events again and again to keep us in a loop of never being able to evolve past 3D so that they can continue to feed on us. Now, how can they feed on us? This is the concept that's coming forward right now. We have all the power. We just didn't know we had it. We didn't know it was ours. And we've been allowing it to be used to create the lower matrix. They need our energy to create the paradigm that's holding back this evolution. But now we understand that we're sovereign. And in fact, this is such a powerful vision that's come forward around the supernova souls. It's like here we have given our authority over to these extraterrestrial, galactic levels of all these different levels of authority of organization. And I just collectively call that the control energies. And then we come to find out that as supernova souls, the definition of a supernova soul is that you've had previous experiences before ever coming to this earth evolution, already an evolved soul. And that puts you above these energies where you've given your power over. So we made contractual arrangements with energies that are lower evolved from where we came from. And so that's just further evidence that it's time for a declaration of independence against all outside influence. Humanity no longer needs to be genetically modified and controlled. And this is where we're coming to this very scary place. And we're being shown these control energies, the global agenda to infect us with nanite technology, mind control, propaganda, programming we've all experienced through media throughout our lifetimes, so that we give up our soul essence. So we disconnect from our soul essence. And that's the danger that's taken over other planets. And what human Earth is trying to, when human Earth throws off these control energies, it's actually going to be supporting many other planets to throw off this artificial intelligence infection. And so it's a very powerful, potent time. And so it's like what's happening in the second American Revolution is for the whole world, but it's also for omniverses and planets that have lost their stuck souls, because the AI agenda is to bring you into a computing cloud system, your psyche, so your soul essence can be farmed. And if you're disconnected from your soul essence, then they essentially own you. And this is this declaration. It's like, yeah, no. And if we knew to the level we've been manipulated through genetic modification, and it's like we are literally rats in a experiment, right? And if we understood the level of that manipulation, and this will need to come out to the surface, but for those of us who have a sense of what this is about and have been present and aware and studying these, levels of truth, you're ready to stand up for your independence and your freedom to evolve. And that's what this is about, and this time is about. So we are all waiting for some divine intervention, right? Like, when is this happening? Like, bring it. Are we having we keep getting these stories of these changes that are going to occur in this age, and this, the second coming and the redemption and the, this divine intervention. And perhaps, the energies that can help us, they're not informed, they're legions of light, they're beyond contracts and agendas. Those beings are working out in the free will universe. So they can't help until we say, okay, we're ready for your help, right? And ask for it. I've never known a time on this earth where so many advanced master level souls and souls that have been just so dedicated to their spiritual purpose, praying and meditating and asking for support. I've never felt that energy so strongly. So it's bound to come. But perhaps, just like the Declaration showed us of independence, it was about cutting the ties. So these legions of light are saying to us, we can't help you while you're loyal to them. That's just a big mess, right? And so what if we can right now declare this independence? So we've got this connection between the second coming, Christ consciousness, this group of very evolved master souls who have been working for eons in this vision of what New Earth would like to become. And the Earth would like to become, that's the Eden star, the Earth is to become. These are all fit into the ideas of the higher octave picture, the golden age of the age of Aquarius. And so there's this overlap between these soul groups and these concepts. Now, this is we have to understand that the ideals that came through the Declaration of Independence and what branded the human first American Revolution were these Aquarian ideals. So it all comes back to this connection to the Aquarian Age. This was very much spelled out by a channeling by Saint Germain, aka Francis Bacon, in the book Twin Flame Union by Claire Hartsong and Catherine Ann Clement. So this is a channel of the Saint Germain energy, kind of explaining how these coming into the Aquarian Age and the ideals that seeded the idea of a free nation and a free world from the beginning, and European ideas, and then gave the strength and the vision to the founding fathers and to the American revolutionaries to begin to claim this freedom. Now we know that we won the Revolutionary War, right? But apparently these energies of control, the crown isn't going to give up that easy, right? And the crown, we can just let that represent all financial control on the planet right now, because it's really behind even countries that we know that the path that China's going in removing of individual rights and the taking over technological technocracy. Even behind the dark money in China is the crown. It all goes back to these extraterrestrially influenced bloodlines that have the idea that they want to control humanity, keep us from our evolution, and keep us as slaves, and so that they can continue to feed on our power. So this is an interesting thing that brings it all together. Now, this channeling of Saint Germain, and he said that his mission, as Francis Bacon, he felt like was to it had everything to do with preparing for the shift from the Piscean Age to the Aquarian Age, and that this was, this long-term project that these souls, supernova souls, all are connected to the Essenes, to the shift of ages, to the original vision of what Earth wants to become, to, back to Atlantean time when we kind of had our fall and all of that. But here's a quote from this book from page 89 of Twin Flame Union, and a channeling of Saint Germain. It says, "I had a part to play with others in the founding of this country, USA. It was my intense desire to create a union of consciousness upon the land, a global community of enlightened beings, of full realization of their power source, no more to be enslaved and governed by any rule that would separate them. I did what I could to inspire the founding fathers of this, your America, to be the land to receive the dove and the eagle into a merging of union, to plant the seeds that a race of beings may come forth. And I am race, America the free." So this was quite the vision, it's quite a spiritual vision. And maybe this is what can make the world events right now make sense. Because we're fighting for the freedom of America and to retain the ideals of a free America, but we're fighting for the freedom of the world from globalist control and the AI agenda and all those other planets that have been fighting this battle. And so this is an interesting that it all comes back together. Now that we know that we are sovereign, and this concept is really important, just so clearly shown. It's like for so many years I've been seeking and trying to help people come into their spiritual autonomy, come into their sovereignty, break the contracts with all authorities, all false authorities. And this is exactly what the founding fathers and the energy of the United States was about claiming this independence, the right of the human to independence. And that's from these meddling extraterrestrial higher evolutionary beings that, 4D, 5D, that have been manipulating us. So now that we see we're sovereign, when you see and understand that you're sovereign and that you answer to no one but Creator, there's no one more powerful than you as an aware soul of your access to this God consciousness is everything they want from us. So it must mean that it's very powerful. It's everything. And so now that when you see that you are sovereign by definition, by birthright, by your inalienable rights as a soul birthed into a human body, then you can become this son of liberty. The sons of liberty were this those who saw themselves on a spiritual purpose with this second American Revolution. With the American Revolution. The American Revolution was seated on a great awakening, which was a return to morality, a spiritual awakening, a revival energy. And then it was the next generation of that revival energy that were the founding fathers and the energies of the revolutionaries. So once you see yourself as sovereign, then you become a warrior for this concept in a way. And maybe that's why we're all being called to say, okay, I officially, with witness by my brethren, and love for my brethren, I break all ties with all control energies, all levels of authority outside of myself, and become the son of liberty. So I talked about how this Declaration of Independence, really the ideas that came through the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, really beautiful words and language, and a great thing to go revisit now that we can see that there's seeds planted for this time that we're in now. But those ideas couldn't come through that declaration without first being defined and refined by Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, and the Common Sense pamphlet became well read, and it put a fire under the butt of Americans to be like, oh, wait, our freedom's being taken from us. We need to fight for this. We need to, whenever you have, in order to have a movement, in order to have social change, in order to have energy in the world, you have to have a brand, you have to have a theme that can bring people together, a motto and an energy. And that's what came through with Common Sense. And so it's interesting to look at that document as a way that was paving the way for the Declaration of Independence. Now, the Declaration of Independence was a simple document based in traditional contract law, proclaiming, it's time, there comes a time to break bonds, and this is what we're doing. And then the reason why it listed the tyrannical acts of the king. And then it called to the brethren, that we're together in union, a representation. These that sign the Declaration of Independence as representatives of the colonies, those members of the colonies, Americans, and that their brotherhood, recognizing their brotherhood and their shared mission. And so this was an important energy. So that's kind of the outline of the Declaration of Independence. And then when we're looking at this Second American Revolution, okay, so going back to the crown, and supposedly the crown and control. So supposedly the Civil War was actually manipulated, by every war throughout time, manipulated on both sides to keep us in this divide and conquer. See how we've had these energies of outside control, outside of human, extraterrestrially influence, that have kept us in this divide and conquer, kept us against each other, and so that we never rise up against our true enemy, and that who's keeping us enslaved. And so supposedly there was a great debt. The whole thing with the Civil War was infiltration and manipulation to create a huge debt so that America continued to be enslaved to the crown through the back channel, right? And then now we're still going up against that energy, the globalist control, the elite, the so-called cabal. There's very, very dark stories and energies that we know it's time to kick off of our planet. And that was really what was going on all the way back in the time of the Essenes and Christ consciousness, incarnating as Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and then throughout pockets of history, planting these seeds, preparing for this time of the age of Aquarius, where we take back our power. And so with Common Sense, was written by, like I said, Thomas Paine, and that was published January 10th, 1776. So 1776 was the official start of the American Revolution, but it had been brewing. So it's really interesting to see the timing, and it's like, because you've got to have the people behind you in a revolution. That's part of what's playing out in our world right now, is that humans are in a comatose sleep programming and don't realize that they are slaves. They don't realize they're being controlled. They don't realize how close they are to giving up their whole life force and earth and humanity. So it's got to play out so that they know, right? But it's not very fun. Now it's interesting though, because the thoughts, the concepts that came through in Thomas Paine's work, which was first called Plain Truth, And that's really a powerful energy, because this is exactly what's going on now. And today I have found myself saying again and again, like, where's our common sense? Where is our logic? Why can't we just think through these things? Why do we want to run and get a vax for something that has a very low chance of killing you, and we don't even know the truth about any of it? They won't tell us the ingredients. Why would you do that? Why can't we think through these things? Why can't we think through the fact that the mask is not protecting us? And so this is an interesting energy as we look at this plain truth, which then became common sense. Now, Thomas Paine, he immigrated to the U.S. in 1774. So he was here just for a year or so before he crafted this document. So he clearly was representing the impulse of the European ideas of the ancient alchemists, that basically were paving the way for this land of the free. So this document catalyzed a rebellious demand for independence. And that's where it's like a brand, right? It's like a movement. You got to have these ideas. You got to be able to put it into words so people can grab a hold of it so that they know what they're fighting for. And there's so much interesting mystery and support for us in these times as we look at the language and the ideas in this document, Common Sense. Because they were radical notions that we're still so far away from. And this is Aquarius. Aquarius is a visionary, right? And it's like, okay, well, there's this future, and then why can't we be there now? So Aquarius energies have a tendency to get ahead of themselves. And in a way, maybe that's why we're in this weird kerfuffle right now, because there's been such this spiritual impulse, but humanity hasn't kept up with it. And now we're at this gridlock, because the divine timeline is trying to come in, and yet how do we educate humanity to be able to receive this or even know that they are about to become a robot? So it was originally signed anonymously by an Englishman, but in this plain truth, which became common sense, the radical ideas that Thomas Paine was talking about was that government was a necessary evil. We don't need government. Basically challenging the idea of government. And it was very treasonous ideas against the crown, which could have never taken place on the continent of England, right? So it's pretty interesting how this all played out. Now, so Thomas Paine said, ideally, humanity should be able to govern themselves, but it's because they don't have moral virtue. Humanity doesn't have moral virtue, so they need to be governed. But he was arguing for law as reason, logic, the natural law, God's laws and the laws of nature. And that language ended up in the Declaration of Independence. So he called monarchy ridiculous. And it's like, just made everybody think, right? It's like, how could you even think, this is just how it is. Of course we have a king, or a queen or a monarchy. Of course this is just who we are as humans, right? This document challenged all of that, which was just absolutely revolutionary. And he called monarchy absurd and useless. And it's like, he used the argument like, okay, well, monarchy is shut away from the world, but they're supposed to be the ones that are understanding how to solve and help the problems of the world. And how can they do that while they're shut out from the world and disconnected? Doesn't make any sense. But very radical. And then, he brought up like, what is the point of the power of a king if that power needs to be checked? Because this was what was going on in the government of England leading up to the American Revolution in those years. The seeds that were planted is checking the power of the monarchy, being like, we need a parliament, to represent the people, because the monarchy, you guys aren't representing us, right? And so a challenge to this energy, and it's a challenge to this elitism, a challenge to that there's one race that's better than another race. And that's exactly these humanitarian ideals, the Aquarian Age. We're all one under God, right? This whole divide and conquer of race against race, sex against sex, country against country, religion against religion, it's all a big play. But this was such a, and that's what America represented, I guess, right? Is that we want to recognize humans as equal under the laws of God, in the eyes of God. Now that's quite a statement, So Thomas Paine was saying, we're not even capable of ruling ourselves while we're under the influence of a partiality. So as long as we're loyal to that king, that monarchy, and that idea that we need to be ruled and governed, we can never govern ourselves. Wow. So this was paving the way for that declaration and for our declaration of independence right now, saying, yeah, we're not playing anymore. We're sovereign in our own being, and we're no longer beholden to the laws and rules of the ruling cabal and the extraterrestrial influencers and the control energies. Humans are going to take charge now and have their human evolution and create this utopia where we do see each other as equal. So part of the deal with common sense and why it was so important is because it demonstrated that there was no other choice but to separate. That's why it was so radical. The language is like, there's no other choice but to separate from the crown, and that's why 6 months later, the Declaration came out in July 4th, 1776, right? So it was a very important document, and just talked about how kings and subjects is unnatural in this idea that there isn't anyone above another one. And he said it was the most preposterous invention the devil ever set foot for the promotion of idolatry, to worship a race, a lineage as higher evolved. Now we know that there's these bloodlines are sacred bloodlines that were infiltrated by these control energies. And that's part of what's happening right now. The rightful rulers coming back into their power that aren't rulers because of what bloodline they're born in, but because of their evolutionary standing, of their inspiration, of their spiritual advancement as visionary souls. Very different picture. And so one of the things that was interesting is that he called, he says, we've given sacred majesty and applied that to a worm, referring to King George as a worm. So that was quite, never could have done that on the continent, right? Maybe that's why he moved to America. Now he talked about that the only sovereign is the King of Heaven, right? So we're only answerable to God Creator as humans, and talking about the sovereignty that is our birthright. Then he talked about the succession, that the next monarch is the same family, and that lineage continues. So just because they're in the same family, says they're the next king. And he says that that's like an added evil to monarchy. And just basically completely treasonous, in concepts that are very much challenging the psyche of the time. He says that all men are original and equal. And kings are a natural proof of the folly of the hereditary right, because the kings have been ineffectual and not representing the people. Now, there was an important concept came from with this common sense that arms, violence is the last resort. But also calling Americans to stand up for their rights and being like, how will you be judged by future generations? And I think this is a thought and a concept that's come up in this time. Like, where are you at? What are you going to tell your grandchildren and great grandchildren about this time that we're in right now? about how you just put your mask on and got a vax? Or are you going to say, no, I stood up for my truth? And this is what he talked about, that our ancestors are remembered. You don't want to be remembered with detestation, hatred by future generations. And that's exactly where we're at right now. I see future generations being like, you guys, I can't believe in a few short years you gave up all of our rights, that everything we fought for and our whole ideal of freedom, out of fear and lies, medical tyranny. So it's a really powerful energy where the revolutionaries, the Sons of Liberty, asked to, how are you going to be represented by your children's children in history? Did you stand up and fight for this freedom, for our God-given right, or did you roll over? And so this was inspiring the American people to have, they needed these ideas to kind of cling on to be like, oh yeah, that's what's going on. But it really resonated with the people. And he went on to say that the sun never shined on a cause of greater worth, right? This cause of freedom, this is humanity's freedom, and all kinds of correlations and connections between the time we're in right now. So very interesting. And he came to the point then that this authority of Great Britain over the colonies has got to end at some point. It's not sustainable. It's got to end. So it was really a very definitive energy of we have no choice. And he lists some events that had happened, clearly now we, at that point, the Americans had been shown the treachery of the crown and what they were willing to do. And this is saying, and then he said, reconciliation is a fallacious dream, and so it ends with, man knows no master, same creating heaven, or those whom choice and common good ordain. So he's saying the law of the land is divine law, God's law, nature's law, and the good man. So it's coming back to this Aquarian ideal of humanity not needing to be ruled over because we're coming into our authority, our autonomy, and exactly what we need to be doing at this time. So here's a quote from the Common Sense, and that kind of speaks to all of this. It says, here then is the origin and rise of government, namely a mode rendered necessary by the inability of moral virtue to govern the world. Here too is the design and end of government, freedom and security. And however our eyes may be dazzled with show or our ears deceived by sound, however prejudice may warp our wills or interest darken our understanding, the simple voice of nature and reason will say 'tis right. So he's calling on this, this is kind of this definition of common sense and what's right and true, and saying that this is inside of the humans. We have this, and it's interesting how he say dazzled with show, right? And this is exactly what's going on now, where all this propaganda to get us pulled into this story to convince us to give up our God-given rights of freedom. And he's saying the simple voice of nature and reason is stronger. It will win. It's the law. And that was this very important basis that led to the Declaration. So, like I said, the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson. And it was about declaring independence only after all other measures have failed. Because really it's an act of war to say we're breaking our ties with you. And so the Declaration had to convince Americans that there was no other choice than to have a revolution. So very, very powerful document. And now it's interesting because Jefferson's original draft, there was a part cut out of the original draft, and that was talking about the British brethren, our common kindred, talking about how, and this was left in a little bit, but that part of the argument was that our own brothers, our own blood brothers, English brothers, are being sent to fight against us. And the deep wrong of that. And that, this is an interesting thing that it did not make it into the Declaration, because maybe this is the piece that we're missing here, is this coming together. And, the forming of the brotherhood, the Sons of Liberty, those who, in order to strengthen the bonds, to kind of get the Americans, the revolutionaries, the colonists to have this passion to stand up and to support the Revolutionary War. So, maybe the part that was cut out was like how they've been abandoned by their own kind. And so it wasn't just the king who had wronged them, but their brothers who were coming against them to fight them. And what that, it's an interesting thing that left out, because it's our brotherhood and our coming together under these very powerful, inspirational ideas of the core rights of humanity. Now is our time to come back together into these concepts. So the Declaration of Independence basically talked about first how in traditional contract law, necessary to dissolve political bonds, contracts, basically saying officially we are no longer playing by your rules. We are no longer a part of your empire. We are free from all contractual arrangements. And then the Declaration goes on to talk about the laws of nature as our true laws. The laws of nature and of nature's God, entitle them, is the words to these rights. And so it's like the natural laws, which is the common sense of why do we have this monarchy, especially across an ocean, telling us and taxing us without representation and telling us what to do, which is exactly what's been gone on with humanity in general, with the control energies stealing from us, and using that money for dark things. So the Declaration then talked about how these truths are self-evident. All men are created equal. I mean, this is such a revolutionary statement, and a very powerful picture of this Aquarian ideals. All men are created equal, endowed by Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, doesn't this fit today? We're not allowed to live. We're not allowed to breathe. We're being told that we have to have something in a foreign product that they won't even tell us what it is in order to go do what we need to do. You have to have a mask on to go to the grocery store. This is tyranny. This is such a blatant example, and yet humanity does not see it. What's it going to take, And so crazy that these ideas were already being put forth and embraced by the colonists at this time. And so the Declaration talked about whenever a government becomes destructive to these ends, it's the right of the people to abolish it. So when a government isn't respecting the rights, the God-given rights and the laws of nature, then we must abolish it. Governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, right? You don't want to just get rid of every government. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce the absolute despotism. It is their right, their duty to throw off such a government and provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient suffering of these colonies. And so this is where we're at here too. Like the control energies, the global agenda, the AI, and the taking away of all of our freedoms, that's no longer in alignment, and it never has been, with God's laws and our inalienable rights. And so it's like everything we need right now is listed in this document. So it's powerful to go back and read these words and use these words for our own declaration of independence from everywhere we gave our power outside of ourselves. Wherever we agreed to be part of this experiment, wherever we agreed to be part of the matrix, wherever we agreed to be genetically modified, wherever we agreed to disconnect from our power out of fear and trauma programming, and put in a better government that's going to actually be for the people. Now, that clearly didn't happen. This is a myth. So many people have given up on even the idea of the Constitution, that it's a myth, it's not possible. These ideas that came forward were Aquarian and visionary and egalitarian and beyond their time. And is it the time now? Was this a seed for us to work with now? So, and such is now the necessity which constrains then and alter their former systems of government. The King of Great Britain has a history of repeated injuries. So the Declaration goes on to list these injuries done to Americans, to kind of, the evidence, this and this and this, and this is unspeakable tyranny, absolute tyranny over the states, and let the facts be submitted. So those facts give them, the Declaration is saying, now we can, with our brethren behind us, we can declare independence. And so the energy of that original draft quoted, the last stab of agonizing affection was being abandoned by our own kind. And it's talking about this brotherhood, which I think has that led to the representation of this new brotherhood energy in the Declaration that says that I pledge, not only do I claim, and this is really important for supernova souls, because I feel like supernova souls are being asked to claim their independence, declare their independence, and claim their brotherhood and the witness of each other and the support of each other in this ideal, this spiritual ideal that you have lived and breathed and expressed and planned for and worked on. These are the projects I've talked about a lot. They're over eons of time that these soul groups have worked on. And so that's the kind of the crucial part of the document ultimately, is that, and this is the last quote of the document, and for support of this declaration, a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, so if you're operating in God's laws and natures, you have a faith that you are cared for, and asking for the support of divine providence. And then we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. So these are the founding fathers seeing themselves as representatives of the American people, saying, we're together on this one. We have to stand together in order to declare our independence. And that, brethren, this brotherly love, this Sons of Liberty, this brand, this movement, depended upon these ideas, so that humanity could so that Americans could take hold and stand behind the revolution. But it was also these founding fathers and these Sons of Liberty pledging their support for one another and for the movement. And so this is the energies that are coming through for us, supernova souls, perhaps as as advanced souls, human souls advanced human souls in a physical body, aware of their God consciousness, representing humanity and saying, humanity, we as representatives of humanity, and want to stand up and recognize the God-given autonomy and sovereignty of the human. And we're going to stand together in this. So it's like you're asking your supernova soul sisters and brothers to be with you, to witness your declaration of independence, and it is creating a field of a space for that divine intervention to come in by us declaring officially with an official document based on the seeds that were planted for us from this time of the first American Revolution, and representing humanity, all who resonate and say, we're not going to take it. Humans, it's our time to throw off the chains of these control energies. And what do those serve to do? Disconnect us from our soul essence and hold back our spiritual evolution, which means it's time to reconnect with our soul essence and get on with our evolution, which all comes back to Christ consciousness. And these players who have been a part of the Atlantean experiment and the technologies and the biblical story and the seeding of these ideas of this Aquarian, egalitarian, humanitarian, no need to be governed ideas coming forward. Now those seeds were planted, and this is what's so profound to understand. And so it's like the document, our declaration as supernova souls, is serving to proclaim and claim officially our independence as with witness as our brothers and sisters, but also forming a bond with these brothers and sisters that we are going to hold space for the divine timeline, for that second coming of Christ consciousness, now that we have broken our bonds with all that's an agenda and all control energies and all these forces that have sought to interfere with our evolution. Now we can hold space together in this brotherly love, these sons of liberty, for that divine intervention, the Christ consciousness to embody, support each other to embody this Christ consciousness, to hold this field and to demonstrate to humanity that this is possible. And so perhaps just like the founders felt that it was necessary to have a very strong language of a Declaration of Independence and a very clear contractual break, they had to demonstrate this break very clearly in order to receive support from other countries. And right now, we need to demonstrate that we're not playing or contributing to the lower matrix, but that we are holding space for that divine timeline, that divine intervention, recognizing our role we've played throughout all these stories, that this intertwining of this revolutionary ideas in government, Christ consciousness, the second coming, and the age of Aquarius. And this is why you're here in this evolution. This is like the Edgar Cayce readings talked again and again about how the Essenes were preparing for this time, and how in Edgar Cayce's time they kept getting messages in the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s when he was doing his readings. These messages of we're preparing for this event. And this is what you've been working on, this project, your whole Earth evolution. So it's a really powerful energy, like bringing all these strings together and helping us understand that we are taking the torch of liberty. The torch of liberty represents the fire of Christ consciousness in our heart. And everything that seeded these ideas goes back to this concept that true freedom comes from this embodiment of the I am. So in this declaration is an opportunity to have an official statement that's witnessed by your brethren. And then you are, on the one hand, cutting all ties of loyalty, right? Because you cannot come into the divine timeline and this divine revelation while you're loyal to these other things. It'll get muddied up, right? So you're saying, nope, I'm no longer loyal. It's just kind of almost like a relationship, right? Like you're going to go and start a new relationship, but you're not quite done with the other one. It's going to get messy, just as a simple concept. We cannot keep those loyalties and receive this impulse of freedom and I am and true human sovereignty at the same time. And it really fits the leap we're making from 3D to 5D. And you're here to lead the way for that. And you've been working on all these projects this whole time. So by using some of the language that is from the Declaration as a way to pay honor and reverence to the Founding Fathers, to those impulses that worked behind the Founding Fathers to seed these ideas in our consciousness. If we didn't have those revolutionary ideas that came into form at that time, we would never be able to make this leap now. So by honoring, we can use some of the language to honor that movement and claim back the torch of the I Am presence with an official declaration. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this declaration. And the parts that are from the U.S. Declaration of Independence are in quotes and italics in the print in the information box below. And all the sources that I've used to get this information for this video you can find in the information box below. But join me together if you'd like to, in your heart and soul, in your words, in your yes to this I am, to this flame of sacred fire, of this true living that we are being asked to do. And perhaps this is the one concept, the one thing that's keeping us from receiving and holding this vibrational field for this divine intervention. And so together, let's go ahead and proclaim our freedom through this declaration. So this is a declaration of independence of human souls as represented by supernova advanced light worker soul groups. And quote, unanimous declaration, unquote, of supernova advanced light worker souls in human bodies. Quote, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve, unquote, the political, spiritual, and galactic bonds, which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel separation. Unquote. Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unquote. Forces of control have done everything to separate humans from their soul essence in many ways. For example, through DNA manipulation, promotion of a toxic environment, fear and trauma programs, and mind control through psychological and technological manipulation. Galactic and earthly false power structures have a history, quote, history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny, unquote, over human souls. We hereby acknowledge and proclaim the truth that there is nothing more powerful than a human soul and a physical body, which by definition gives access to God consciousness. May all recognize that we advanced souls and all true human souls in a physical body in this earth realm with access to God and Christ consciousness are, by definition, sovereign, and therefore must answer to no one besides the one Creator, the way, the life, the plan, or thy will. We representatives of all supernova and advanced lightworker souls and representing all souls of true humanity and, quote, appealing to the supreme judge of the world, unquote, it is self-evident that these said souls and all true humanity, quote, are and of right ought to be free and independent. Quote, and for support of this declaration, a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And so this is just a way to officially proclaim and claim our autonomy, so much as an intuitive healer looking at past life stories. Every single reading I've ever done, it's come up to a point in the story of a past life where for some reason you had to agree to a power outside of yourself. And so it's been a process of looking at a lifetime, having something. This always correlates what's coming up in your life. And then there's this contractual arrangement where you said, okay, your agenda, the church, the government, the family lineage, the who knows what galactic council. The agenda is more important than my own soul spiritual agenda. But this document is helping us see that we need to come completely out of agenda and back into thy will. And this is our God-given rights. And we will not stand for them to be taken. And we will stand in our brotherhood of love and light to support each other in this proclamation, this declaration of independence, this second declaration of independence for this second American Revolution and the second coming of Christ consciousness, paving the way for this energy to incarnate. We've always seen, our mind wants to say the second coming of Jesus or of Christ consciousness would be another human embodying that. And maybe that would happen. But the picture that's coming is that all these souls that have worked on all these projects throughout time actually are together hosting Christ consciousness in your soul group. And how are we doing that? We're incarnating our higher evolved self that we've disconnected from in order to make it through human evolution. But now the energies on the planet can host this again. And these new babies coming in are supporting us in hosting this vibrational frequency. And yet, how can we open to that divine revelation and divine rule while we're loyal to outside agendas? And so this is a way to say, hey, I take back all my power and I break all bans, all bonds, all contracts where I, in any lifetime throughout all time and space, where I gave my power away to something, an agenda or an idea or an organization, something outside of myself. Nothing is more powerful, true, real than your own divine essence, your soul essence, your path, your soul spiritual gifts that are landing with your incarnation of this Christ consciousness, your bigger self, are absolutely in alignment with the divine timeline, with thy will. And it all fits together. And, there's been an elaborate delusion and created by fear programming to keep us, as soon as we try to go outside of that matrix into our freedom, into our autonomy, to scare us right back in. And I've seen it again and again and again with souls. And we know this story, right? This declaration is saying, I'm not scared and I'm going to make this leap. And I'm going to hold, me and my brothers, we're going to witness each other in this declaration of independence and see this field, hold this space for the second coming, for this age of Aquarius, for this evolution of humanity, and let's get on with it. And that vibrational energy is what ultimately throws off the control energies from the planet. But we're waiting and waiting and waiting for this divine intervention. But maybe this divine intervention can't come while we're loyal. And it's up to us, advanced souls, to recognize these concepts and claim this independence and proclaim to the cosmos that we see our sovereignty, we understand our sovereignty, and all contracts of power, authority outside of ourselves null and void in this moment. So thanks so much for joining me for this declaration, a second declaration, very interesting concepts. And are you ready for your freedom, your autonomy, your golden age? And together, we're holding space for that. So thank you so much for being here and all your hard work as a supernova soul, making it through, all you've made it through, so you can declare this independence and this usher in this beautiful golden age of the Aquarian age that you've planned for and worked for and all this time. Don't lose heart. It's a time when we're really getting pulled back into lower energies because the lower matrix is on full throttle to try to, because we're coming to the edge, it's dismantling. But don't lose heart, because that's actually evidence that you're almost there. We made it. And this is a big step, because how can we expect that legions of light to support us when we have loyalties to lower forces and agendas? And so now we proclaim our autonomy, our sovereignty together, and hold space for this descending lightship of Christ consciousness into each heart and soul as the I Am race. So thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next update. Until then, I'm Adrienne Elise. Namaste.